Hello everyone, my name is Max McGillivray from Beanstalk Global. As you can see from my backdrop, we've got a very interesting broadcast today, all about agri-leadership. You all know, or you might not know if you're listening in on an international basis, about the great team that is the AHDB. And they're always looking to create a difference. They're looking to create a difference in the respect of leadership. And we are, Beanstalk and I, with the team at AHDB, are looking to help everyone with a broadcast series called Leadership Broadcast, Talking Leaders. And we're very privileged to have a chap on a little bit later, a chap by the name of Tim Bradshaw, who has got a fascinating background, as you're all going to find out. And the reason why we're really keen to bring Tim on, because there's so many learnings that we can understand, pick up, as through a sort of process of osmosis, learn from key individuals such as Tim. We know how important it is to be inspired by both big businesses and individuals, which is why we're very excited to present Talking Leaders, a new monthly initiative from the AHDB. And this is going to set up a series of inspirational speakers to share their life experiences and deliver impactful stories to the AgriLeader community. So when we speak to Tim later, you're going to find out that he's a British Army officer, and he's also, would you believe it, an Everest mountaineer. And Tim's going to discuss with us as to how to deal with a crisis and cope with situations where a carefully laid out plan can be ruined by factors outside of your control, and how you deal with it, and how you keep moving forward, and how you bring your team with you. We've all been in, and especially in the last year, in various states of crisis, and trying to find a way as to how to come through that in a positive manner to fulfill what you're looking to achieve is really, really important, which is, again, is a really key reason why we've set up this Talking Leaders broadcast. I just want to bring in a couple of key individuals from the AHDB so you can also learn from them. Mark Campbell, please come in. Isaac Van Herden, come in. So Mark, fantastic to see you.
Good morning, Max. Yeah, good to see you as well.
And Isaac, fantastic to see you as well.
Good morning everyone.
So, Mark, can you just give a bit of a background what you do within the great organisation that is the AHDB, please?
Yeah, thank you, Max. So, I sit in the Business Insights and Skills team, and with Isaac have created and are running out a program called AgriLeader. So, AgriLeader essentially is a program that we're trying to build a community around anything leadership, management, and people.
Fantastic. And Isaac, please introduce yourself.
Hi there, yeah, I'm Isaac van Heerden, and with Marks and lead on the AgriLeader program. We basically have it based around three key themes of leading myself, leading others, and leading my business. And we feel that are the areas that's important for people to, in their businesses to focus on. Today's topic will probably focus on leading myself, but through this program of AgriLeader, we will touch on all three areas.
Gentlemen, well done. If there's something I've learned over the last year, over and above collaboration seems to be really key within business, especially within farming. Training, development, leadership. There's a graph I keep on discussing that came out from Cranfield University that shows that the more training development that you put into a team, the better increased turnover you can attract, and also the better profitability, and also the better staff retention. Do you think, gentlemen, that traditionally the ag sector has been a little bit weak on training, a little bit weak on leadership training? Mark, what do you think?
I think it's not been the focus. So there's been a definite driver to all that technical delivery and that technical training, and it's kind of forgotten about the people and the leadership and management development. And that's the reason why we're trying to develop this program and spread the community across all the sectors, because whatever sector you sit in, whether it's a horticulture sector, whether it's in dairy, there's one commonality, which is there's people, whether that's a team of people that you employ, whether that's the family, your mother, father, brother, sister. We need to develop ourselves as people as well as to develop that technical ability.
Mark, We've actually just had a report, Max, that looked into that, the Bridging the Gap AgriLeader report, and it shows that about less than 0.5% of farmers and growers actually invest every year in this leadership and management type training. So definitely room for improvement there.
Well, it's a fascinating area, isn't it? There's that old saying that the best thing about running a business is employing people, but the worst thing about running a business is employing people. But if you've got a team that's highly motivated and in some respects managing you as a senior leader because of the time and investment that you've put into them, what a great place to be. And again, that's why I think this Talking Leaders broadcast is such a good idea, so that we can give everyone, Isaac, Mark, a short, pithy 1 hour, so that people can watch it on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, or on the podcast series, and just to learn from individuals who've gone through real life changing experiences. So we, through this, I used this word osmosis earlier, through a process of osmosis, we can learn from them. And I don't know about you guys, I've learned some real key elements from key people just by listening to them. And then when I've been in that situation, I can recall back to thinking, well, that individual said, if you do this, then it might actually work. And as a rule, it works. So I think it's a great idea. And what about Tim? Before we bring Tim in, why did you look to select Tim as our first expert on Talking Leaders, please, Mark?
So Tim, what a story he's got, and he's got all sorts of challenges, and just meeting him and meeting some of the other colleagues at Sandstone, it just where they're utilising experiences and challenges which have encompassed within their personal lives and within their careers, it's this really replicable back into the agriculture and horticulture sector, because it's all about nicking the good ideas, isn't it? Like you said, learning those bits and pinch them and trying to apply them into your business.
Yeah. And Isaac, would you agree?
Definitely. As the AgriLeader team, we're always looking at bringing farmers something different, something else. So, hence we're always looking for that cutting edge speaker, that cutting edge, podcast, all of those kind of things. So we don't like to stick to the normal, and hence how we came across Tim. So yeah.
So again, there's some fantastic podcasts and videos out there from the farming community, but they do tend to circulate around the trusted old people that they wheel out, and everyone has heard them or seen them before. So I think that's why. Well, I'm so excited to hear from Tim. Isaac, Mark, shall we bring Tim in?
Yeah, no, bring him in. Tim,
could you enter the room, please?
Hi guys, Isaac. I've got to tell you, there's nothing normal about you. It's good news.
I'll take that as a compliment, Tim.
It's definitely a compliment. It's 100% a compliment.
But Tim, we just got to make one point. That Mark and I, we dressed up so we look the same in the terms of our shirts. Isaac is out there left field, and you haven't followed the dress code. So this is I don't know if that's a minus point against you already. I'm sure it's not.
No, we'll be okay. I don't know if I've ever been described as an expert before. That's actually quite exciting. Although I do have to tell you that I've just watched all 8 episodes of Clarkson Farming back to back. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm now an expert, and I want a Lamborghini tractor, which I've no idea if they're any good or not, but it's pretty cool.
But fantastic. And Tim, just before we get going with you, and we lose Isaac and Mark for a short period of time, what's your take on the fact that we've got this really interesting, passionate sector of farming? But there is this underlying issue of leadership, this underlying issue of training. Oh, Tim, if I could give you a magic wand, how would you solve that, do you think?
The fundamental problem, actually, and it's not just farming or agriculture, it's across a lot of sectors. Anybody that's a professional, whatever they do, whether that's farming, lawyers, accountancy, vets, it doesn't matter. We all focus on being what we want to be good at, being a good lawyer, being a good farmer, being a good vet. And actually, it's almost as though all the way through that process, nobody says to us, you have to lead the family at some point. You have to lead the business at some point. And, in the aviation industry, they talk about your logbook. If you're an airline pilot, it's how many hours have you got in your logbook? Well, if we were to ask all the guys listening to this, guys and girls, obviously, how many hours have you got, farming in your logbook? The answer would be thousands. How many hours have you got leading or leadership training? It would be very few. And that's not a criticism. It's just one of those things that kind of happens upon us. We happen upon leadership rather than prepare it right from the word go. And I've got to say, full hat off to Mark and Isaac, because actually there are so many lessons you can learn. So for me, it's about a toolbox and outcomes rather than a process. I always laugh. If you walk into a coffee shop and you ask for a regular black coffee, the first thing you get asked is, do you want milk in that? And I'm like, well, then it's not black, is it? Right? And that's because somebody's following a blind process. And that just doesn't work with people. So actually, if you broke down, obviously I am literally basing this on Clarkson guys, by the way, but I know Paul quite well, right? He's a vet. So, but actually, if you break it down, you've got people operating long hours, really hard on their own, very tight margins, big teams of people in diverse locations. That's the problem we need to solve, if that makes sense. And therefore, let's take anybody that's experienced of working in diverse locations, dealing with different teams of people, etc. And exactly as Mark said, let's nick those skills and create a toolkit rather than a process. And that way, and hopefully what we'll talk about today is I'll give you a few tools like toolbox, and then at the right moment you take that tool out of the toolbox and you use it rather than trying to follow a blind process. And if somebody's already developed that tool for a given set of circumstances, why start from scratch? Let's use that one. Brilliant.
Yeah. And Tim, what's that saying that there's 50 harvests in a conventional farmer? Can you imagine if you could get hold of that farmer or a similar individual, and you could change their thinking, their learnings right at the early stage of their career, so that they're so progressive all the way through their career, rather than going through the same routine and perhaps doing it wrongly, and they're not doing it wrongly for any particular reason over and above, perhaps not being engaged with the likes of the AHDB or with the likes of yourself. So again, that's what I'm really keen with this Talking Leaders broadcast, to just positively influence people. So Mark, Isaac, could you just turn off your videos? So Tim, we've given you a bit of a rah-rah about your background, but could you just go into a bit more detail about your good self, please?
Do you just want a bit of background before we get into this? Yep. So guys, Basically, I'm not much of an academic, to be completely honest with you. I mean, I can read, but that's sort of pretty much where it ends. So I joined the army 18, 19, and I went to Sandhurst. And to be honest, I was pretty rubbish at it, in all honesty. But all I've ever done my whole life is lead people in weird situations at most. I've never done anything else. And there's no right answer. And as you get older and more experienced, I guess you get better at it. And then from there, I went off and I took on some specialist duty stuff. So I worked in intelligence, and that was all about influencing people. And it was about getting to know people, understanding what makes people tick, and how can you help people achieve their outcomes in order to achieve our outcomes. And you can read into that whatever you want. And then as that service came to an end, as we'll discuss a little bit later on, we thought it might be a really good idea to go and climb Mount Everest, because what else would you do when you stop? And in actual fact, our real mission around that was around mental health. And, my personal take on mental health is that actually it's the big, tough people that need the help the most. And it's actually about asking for help rather than there's plenty of support available if you ask. And people, by definition, are tough, don't ask for it. So we decided we were going to stand on the highest point on earth and shout out that it's all right to ask for a bit of help.
Wow.
I'll tell that story a little bit later on. And then from there on in, Paul and I, obviously formerly the West Point Veterinary Group, Paul and I got together and we set up this because we wanted to take all of those various experiences to help other people kind of learn some of those lessons that we've learned the hard way, I guess. And then Paul and I went off together. We'll show you the video again later, and did some wacky things. We did a challenge every year for a month, and we continue to do that. So.
Yeah, and Tim, there's so many things to pull on. If you look at the average age of the UK farmer, Mark and Isaac will correct me later, I'm sure, but it is in the late 50s, and there are soldiers within the sector. They have to be big and tough, but also because they're big and tough, I know this personally. They find it very difficult to share, especially when they've got when they've got issues. So again, if we can assist them to open up, share. As you said, there's enough support out there. We were just saying in our green room that we did a recent broadcast on coaching and mentors, and I've been astounded by the number of views that's had and the uptake. So this is just definite clamour, but there still is this worry within the farming community, especially with mature men, that they don't want to engage, they don't want to communicate, they don't want to open up. So again, to learn from you is going to be fantastic. Leadership, you I love the way that you just brush through that. It's almost like you were born a leader. Tim, were you born a leader?
No, definitely not. But at school that was kind of the done thing. Get your grades, do whatever. And I applied to Sandhurst. And initially, I just applied to the army actually. And I went through various application processes, and the army put me through some tests. And the army said, "You know what? We think you've got a bit of an aptitude. Maybe you should be an officer." So you go through the whole officer selection, the whole officer selection process, which is hundreds of years old, frankly. And then obviously from there to the Royal Military Academy with Sandhurst, and age 19, that was pretty daunting, to be honest with you. Wow. But my personal belief is it's still probably the best single leadership training academy, in the world. The army doesn't have all of the answers. It's certainly not perfect, and it's very different leading soldiers that fundamentally have to call you sir and do what they're told, to trying to influence and lead people that are also trying to eke out a living and trying to make their way forward. So, but it's an amazing bedrock. It's an amazing foundation to build upon it.
Yeah, and just two things from there, Tim. On a recruitment perspective, on a day job, we run a recruitment business within ag and fresh produce. That we see some stunning individuals coming from the services looking to come into the ag sector. There's a resistance, would you believe, Tim, for some ag businesses to actually even interview these individuals. And I try to explain to them that they have upwards of £250,000 worth of training development to lead people and organizational skills. And some of the people that we've seen go into key businesses in the fresh produce and agribusiness sectors in the UK and internationally, they've transformed those businesses because of the training that they've had, that the likes of yourself have had. So if you're looking to hire, please look at people who are ex-military, because they're just like Tim, brilliant. Tim, would you agree on that?
Max, you're obviously like the expert on recruitment. I get it, but actually, what we tend to do when we look at people is, if you kind of sit down and you say, okay, what are the skills that I need to achieve? What is it I need to do? Or I need somebody that's not going to quit. I need somebody that's resilient. I need somebody that's going to problem solve, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, to be honest. So I'll sort of leave that, and we'll come to that later on. But actually, look for the skills that you need, and then say to yourself, okay, well, where do those skills exist? And actually, within soldiers, there is a really strong work ethic. There is always the option to get this job done. Within the military leadership styles, we tend to say, right, this is the objective, this is the mission, this is what we're going to do. Not achieving that is never an option, and is not discussed. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when we get into this. But that's the point. And for me, and I joked about Clarkson, but actually the amount of respect I have for what you as an industry go through, and the hours that you push, and the amount of times you must just think to yourself, do you know what? I just don't want to get out of bed this morning. It's 4:00 in the morning, and it was 4:00 in the morning yesterday, and I finished at midnight, but I've just got to crack on. And to me, outside of the farming community, soldiers are the only people I'm not saying nobody does, but in my world, where that attitude is instilled in them.
Yeah. And to just to go slightly left of field, I was very privileged to meet an individual recently who owns a large farming estate, and prior to that he owned a large London-based estate agency, and this individual, when he was growing this estate agency very rapidly, he interviewed over 22,000 people to join his businesses. And speaking to him, well, how do you, you're a leader, how do you ascertain that the people that you're interviewing are any good, are going to be good for your business? And he summed it up that he stated that within a period of time, he could work out within 2 minutes as to whether that person was going to fit their business model or not. Hence the sort of numbers that he was getting through. With Sandhurst and yourself, how does the army identify who's got the potential to be a leader?
I'm a little bit out of date now, to be honest with you. But it's a long old process, and it starts off with the very basic skills, as you'd imagine, kind of fitness, basic educational qualifications, bits and bobs, no rocket science. And forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn. It was, I went to Sandhurst in 1995, so it's quite a long time ago now. But then fundamentally, so the motto of Sandhurst is serve to lead. And I think currently, so in a corporate environment, there's an attitude of I'm the boss and my team is going to run round after me. Whereas actually what we're really looking for is leaders that facilitate. And we're going to talk about that, I'm going to sort of overstep it. But I have this theory, right, which is as a leader, you need to relieve pressure, not add pressure. If you want to increase the performance of your team, you need to relieve the pressure on them, not add the pressure on them. They are already under pressure. They are already tired. If people are making mistakes because they're under pressure, adding more pressure makes it worse, not better. Fact. So actually, in other words, the leader needs to sacrifice him or herself to get the team to perform. And I've got this kind of concept of an umbrella. As a leader, you kind of put this umbrella up. I'm going to stand tall above my people and give them the breathing space to operate underneath me so that they can then perform to the very, very best of their abilities. And that's the job of the leader. And I think the sort of movie perception is Don't get me wrong, with the military, there's a time and place where you go out front and you charge, follow me, chaps, let's go. But actually, those are quite rare. The real influence, if you like, to me around leadership and what Sandhurst looks for is for leaders that actually care more about them teams than themselves and have the ability to bring the best out of other people rather than necessarily kind of judge their own performance.
Wow. We are 20 minutes in. I've learned a masterclass already from yourself, Tim. Tim, I know that you've got a video that you'd like to show us. Do you want to show us now, or would you like to show that a little bit later? How would you like me to steer this?
I don't mind. Shall we tell the story of where we got to, Max? Shall we? Let me just see if.
Yes, please. Until whilst you're setting that up, just a housing call. Anyone who's either on the Zoom live or on Facebook live, on LinkedIn live, if you've got any questions, dial them in, and I'll make sure I present them over to Tim. Okay, Tim.
How's that? Are we seeing the screen okay there, Max?
Yes, we can see danger ahead.
Literally, yeah. So, guys, first of all, I want to tell you a little bit of a story. I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey, right? Imagine, if you will, that you're fit and strong. You've spent 2 years preparing yourself for a dream of a lifetime, right? And that dream is to go and climb the biggest mountain in the world. And you've watched what you've eaten, you've trained physically, and you've raised the money and the funding, and you're finally there. And you've been a month at base camp at Everest, and you're standing there. And you're looking up this mountain, and all of a sudden you think to yourself, I can hear a weird noise, and this weird noise starts to happen. Yeah, that's a bit odd. Am I the only one hearing this? And then you start to look around you, you realise that other people can hear it too, but you don't really know what's happening to it. And then all of a sudden that noise gets louder and louder and louder. And that noise gets to the point where suddenly you can feel it. You can feel yourself starting to vibrate with this noise, and you can feel it under your feet. And suddenly you realise that stuff around you is actually moving. And you think, I don't know what's going on. What you don't know is that above you, 20 million tons of rock, snow and ice has broken free because of the earthquakes. And it's accelerating its way down the mountain, north of 100 miles an hour. And it's headed for exactly where you're standing. And suddenly all of this kind of hell breaks loose around you. And you think to yourself, what do I do? Why am I here? There is no way out of this. What's happening to me? I don't understand. You've been in gunfights in Afghanistan. You've been undercover doing all sorts of strange operations. And yet suddenly you are 100% out of control. How do you get out of that situation? Where does it come from? And I just wanted to share a couple of key points with you today. And I'm going to put this into context for you. That day, I didn't know what was happening. I was like a crazy goalkeeper. Imagine, if you will, that the clouds were like 50 or 60 meters above us. And the rocks were tearing down this mountain. We couldn't see them until they broke the cloud cover. And if you watch the Euros at the moment, I'm kind of there like some sort of crazy goalkeeper, jumping out of the way of what's going on. But the problem is that the rocks that appeared from the clouds are the size of cars. And it's like some sort of dodgy 1980s adventure movie with the ground literally opening up amongst you. And you're totally out of control. I phoned my dad and I tried to put a brave face on it. I was like, Dad, this is not cool. And my dad, I found out later, put the phone down and turned to my mum and he said, not sure Tim's coming home. And of all the things I've done and all the places I've been, that was the only time where my dad thought, Tim's not coming out of this one. And to some extent, that was luck. I was sort of stood in the right or the wrong place, depending on how you look at it. But there's 2 or 3 lessons that you need to ask yourself to take out of that situation, okay, to try and deal with that. So let's wind that back a bit. I'm going to come back to Everest in just a minute, but I'm going to lighten the mood first, because let me show you a little video. And this is the video that Max was appertaining to. So, when you go train to climb Mount Everest, obviously you climb other mountains and you practice and you try and do that. So I thought you might like this. Has any of you in the audience ever eaten a Toblerone? And if you have, the bit I'm about to show you is the mountain on the side of the packet of Toblerone, the Matterhorn in Switzerland, Zermatt in Switzerland, to be really, really specific. And this is Paul Hall and I walking across the summit ridge of it. But we'll come back to the point of this in a minute. If you don't like heights, you probably want to look away now. The nav is easy. There's no more up. All right, Paul. Yeah, so just out of interest, did anybody happen to notice the orange rope there that was attached to me and Andy, the guy in front of me? And I'll hazard a guess. If Andy was to trip and fall off that mountain, it's 4,500 meters, by the way, straight down from there. You literally touch nothing till you land in Zermatt below, which would give someone skiers a bit of a shock. But actually, if Andy falls to the left, what I've got to do is jump to the right, the other side of the mountain, and we end up kind of a pendulum looking after each other. And when you talk about teamwork and looking after each other, it's pretty awesome. The other point I want to make is, at that point there, just before I talk about fear, you're walking along a pathway. I'm actually only putting one foot in front of the other and everything is okay. But the point I'm trying to make is that we're prepped. We're ready for it not to be okay. So we know our drills. We've practiced what happens next. If it goes wrong, we know what we're going to do. So although it's okay at the moment, we know that we're one step, we're one heartbeat, if you like, from it not being okay. And we're ready for that. So in other words, don't wait till it's gone wrong to try and work out what you do. Prep yourselves first as best you can. Have a standing operating procedure. Anyway, so we've got this concept, and this is relevant to Everest, and it's relevant to when we find ourselves in really challenging situations. And with this idea that fear is false expectation appearing real. One of the things, and the last year has been amazing for it, and it's actually why people go off and buy 100 toilet rolls, but it's another story. We have this urge to get control, to work out what's going on. And a lot of the stress and pressure that we're dealing with can be perception of. So in other words, false expectation. What the first thing you need to do is filter out the intelligence from the information. Work out what's really happening to me right now. And what do I actually need to deal with right here, right now? And anything else can wait. And we can quite often find ourselves in this situation where we kind of coulda, woulda, shoulda. Might be doing this, could be doing that. If this goes wrong, that'll happen. If that happens, this will go wrong. And then when that happens, I'll lose everything. But actually, we're focusing on things that haven't happened yet, that actually may not happen. And we're creating more anxiety. And what we need to try and do is filter out our bandwidth. Now, I'm certainly not belittling the situations that anybody's found themselves in. I'm giving you a tool to help deal with it. So I always laugh. Over the last 12 months, for sure, we've all been trying to use the internet, yeah? So you're at home and you're trying to, I don't know, whatever it might be, have some sort of Zoom meeting, Teams meeting. Your other half is on the FaceTime for your distant relatives that you didn't speak to anyway, that now you suddenly speak to 3 times a week and they're trying to use an internet-based communication system. The kids are probably streaming online games and somebody else is trying to use Netflix. And the thing goes, and your bandwidth runs out. And to get it working again, what you've got to do is you've got to free up your bandwidth. You've got to get it operational again. And what do we do? So you've got to close things down. And that's where this comes in. So suddenly the kids stop streaming, granny stops FaceTiming, and the internet comes back again. And that's what you've got to try and do to yourself. So when you find yourself, when you feel that anxiety, that pressure coming in, and that, by the way, is normal. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're weak. It's completely normal, especially in super high pressure situations. So the first thing that I then do is go, okay, fine. What's false? What's real? What do I actually have to deal with? And occasionally I even write that down because I just find that easier, but it's whatever works for you, right? So you work it out, take a deep breath and deal with that false expectation. So let's go back to the situation that I find myself in on the bottom of this mountain, at the foot of Mount Everest. Just have a little listen to this for a minute. Max, you make sure we can just hear the audio on this one for me because it's quite quiet. Okay. So you can hear it.
Got it.
It was a very clear.
Yes.
We're actually across the other side of the mountain on the Tibetan campsite, and we're surrounded on every side. Well, I'm at 5,200 meters, so you have to forgive sort of croaky voice and slight breathlessness. Because you can imagine at the mountains where I stand, tower above me up to 6,000 and 7,000 meters, and they're all rock scree slopes. And the first thing that started to happen was literally the tent started to rock and to move around us. And almost like thunder, huge boulders started to break away around us from the sides of the mountains and roll down to the bottom to the base camp. Everybody here was absolutely fine because the local Sherpas, know exactly what they're doing, and they positioned all our tents and equipment to protect us from just such a thing happening. But as I said, we're in fact the other side of the mountain from Nepal and the Tibetan side, so quite a way away from the epicentre. And yet still it was quite significant. The guys here have done amazing job looking after each other. And of course there's some anxiety now amongst the steppers, the majority of whom are Nepalese, trying to phone home using various sort of satellite communication systems to check that their sort of homes and families, everything are okay. So yeah, it was certainly very dramatic. What felt like half an hour, but I think it was probably more like 10 seconds this morning.
So guys, here we are, and I don't want to be morbid, but it was over 7,500 people died that day in Tibet and in Kathmandu. There was over 200 people killed on the side of the mountain. And so here's some top tips. Here's some tips I took out of that to get myself through that situation. And it's not unlike some of the situations we find ourselves in the morning. And the first thing you do is accept the situation and then be part of the solution. Okay, so in other words, very quickly I realized I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't stop it happening. I couldn't fix it. There was no right answer. So essentially I accepted the fact that any decisions I took from now on in were the least bad decisions, and they were the best that I could do given the circumstances that I was in. So as a leader personally, I accept that. I go, I can't fix this. I can't make that not happen. I can't make myself or my team anywhere else. So I'm going to accept it. And I'm now going to deal with this the best way I can. And I'm a man on the ground, right? So whatever decision I'm going to take is the best one that I could do. I'm actually not a big fan of kind of retrospective leadership criticism. It's a story for another day. The first thing you've got to do is provide direction and reassurance. People need to be part of the solution. One of the reasons people all rushed out and bought 100 toilet rolls when coronavirus kicked off was because they're trying to get back control. We need control of the situation that we're in. And one of the things that's absolutely amazing as a leader is the first thing you've got to do is reassure your team. You don't need to be a Spartan leader. You don't need to be a warrior. It's perfectly okay for your team to know that actually you're scared too. But what you are going to do is provide reassurance. Hey, guys, we're going to work this. We're going to keep working this problem. We're going to keep solving the problem. We're going to stay together. We're going to look after each other. And often that's what people need to hear, is that reassurance. Not that you're going to solve it, because you can't solve it. It's reassurance. We're going to look after each other. Then what you're going to do is provide direction. This is what we're going to do. One of the guys in the base camp when we were there was all at sea. Not literally, he was at base camp, but he was all over the place. So what we actually did is we asked him to go away and we asked him to start counting up how much food and rations we had left between all of the teams at base camp. And what that did is that direction gave him something to focus on. So actually, rather than kind of cuddle him and pat him on the head and tell him, be okay, and leave him in a corner, what we needed to do is to get him operational again for his own mental health and his own perseverance, not ours. So actually, by giving him direction, suddenly he was part of the solution. He was part of the answer, and he had a contribution to make that totally lifted his spirits. And he went from focusing on what had gone wrong to how he was going to help him do the best that he possibly could. And it absolutely transformed the performance, if you like, of that individual. Then as a leader, you see his morale lift, that in turn was your morale. The whole team starts to swing together and you start to support each other. And then the next point that comes out of this is you must, where possible, focus on what you can do. It's completely normal to doubt yourself, right? But I am absolutely certain that over the last 12 months, all of us at some point have been going, I haven't got this, I haven't got that. I hate this expression of getting back to normal, right? I'm not interested in what happened before, because that was before. So what I'm going to do is, where am I going next? How can I be part of the solution? So bear in mind now, okay, I'm an ex-intelligence officer who is now in Tibet, brackets China, depending on your politics. The entire town that we drove through to get there was gone, fallen into the river, disappeared. So I'm now effectively in China as a former intelligence officer without any of the right paperwork. And I've now got to go across mainland China to an airport to leave the country. I've got to tell you, I look really bad in orange jumpsuits, okay, just to add to our problems. So, but what we actually did was utterly focused on what we could do. Didn't try and change the situation, didn't try and get back to normal. At no point did we work out what we lost. I mean, the accountant tried to work that out later in terms of kit and equipment. All we did, okay, how much food have we got left? What communication systems do we have left? What kit and tents and equipment do we have left? What routes are available to us? And what we didn't do at that point was we never, at any circumstances, started to kind of drag it down. No, that won't work because that won't work because that won't work because. So everything we did was, what can we do? That doesn't mean it's perfect. It's not a best case scenario. Remember, we're making least bad decisions a lot of the time, but we focused on what we could do and what we could achieve. What you then find is that same effect as that young guy that I was talking about happens to everybody. And suddenly the team is focused on achieving what we can do. And for me, in any of these super difficult situations, if that's what you can do, if you can learn to focus on what you have got, what you can do, and moving towards the answer, then actually that's the critical thing. Free up your broadband. I don't mean literally. Yeah. Free up your broadband. Deal with the false expectation. Work out what's real and where your priorities are. And then every decision you take from then on in should be part of the solution. So what can I do? What have I got? Where can I go? And I think if I was to kind of leave you with two top tips, both as personally and as leaders, because I appreciate that quite a lot of you guys are kind of quite isolated a lot of the time, then that would be it. So I'm going to leave the kind of formal bit of this there, Max, I think. And I'm hoping that was enough to kind of whet your appetites a little bit. And there's more stuff we can talk about. But I think it'd be much more useful to have perhaps some open conversations and some questions and answers, Max. But I'm happy to be guided by you.
Tim, fantastic. I think the seminal moment for me on that was that call to your father. And for your father, obviously knowing your history and all of your combat experience, to say to your mother, I don't think Tim's coming back. Oh, good grief. I think we're very blessed to have you here in respect of you and your team surviving. So my three takeaways: accept the situation, direction and reassurance, focus on what you can do. And I love the direction and reassurance. That example that you gave of one of your colleagues, one of your teammates that was slightly off the rails and getting them redirected. I've seen that personally in circumstances I've been. And what a great positive distraction to bring them back on side. There's so many interesting things that we. Well, if I could add that,
I think actually the other bit that absolutely goes hand in hand in that, and you just spurred my thought process, is actually you've got to forgive yourself sometimes too. And I've got this idea of setting expectation, right? So in other words, in any of these situations, if you look at the last 12 months, I can only imagine what the farming communities have been through in the last 12 or 15 months. I cannot get my head around it. It is not possible for you to have gone through that period of time and not doubted or questioned yourself at some time. And that is normal. The question I get asked most about all of this stuff is, do you ever want to quit? Do you ever want to give up? I say, yeah, every single day. That's completely normal. What makes you a warrior is not quitting. And I think around all of these things, don't think for a second that it's perfect, because it's not. And when you're in those situations, yes, we're going to be positive. Yes, we're going to go forward, but you are naturally going to doubt yourself. That's normal. That doesn't mean you're failing. It doesn't mean you're a bad leader. It means you're normal.
Yeah. Tim, fantastic. Tim, can you just stop your screen share, because we want to see you. We want to see handsome you. So I fully understand that element about not wanting to quit. As a leader, isn't it quite difficult sometimes that you need to talk, you need to share the burden, but as a leader, can you?
Yeah, I absolutely think you can, Max. For me, the stoic leader thing, the sort of Spartan warrior, as Paul and I often discuss it actually doesn't work, because what happens is, in a difficult situation, it widens the gap between those that are dealing with it and those that aren't dealing with it. And what happens is, if you're an absolute trooper, Max, and the persona is that you've got this and there's no problem, it's all fine, and then I'm starting to struggle, what happens is I doubt myself even more, because I now say to myself, well, Max has got this, Max is brilliant, why am I not dealing with this? So it actually widens the gap. And I always liken, at some point, most of us at school, or obviously for me with the military, whatever, you go out for a run in the pack, and you're kind of clinging on to the back of the pack by your teeth. And you just assume that you're the only one that's suffering, right? And then what happens is the person next to you, or the person in front of you, lets out a big old gasp, and they go, wow, I don't know if I can keep this up for much longer. This is horrendous. And rightly or wrongly, you suddenly feel better, right? Because you go, yes, I'm not the only one that's struggling. And to me, that's the most simple analogy, because then what happens is the same thing. So as a leader, when you go, wow, this is pretty rubbish, all the team go, oh, blimey, he is human, that's okay. But then what happens is your example then becomes the fact that you are still working the problem. And that's what inspires people to do the same.
Fantastic. I've got 3 screens here. I've got a phone. I'm getting lots of things coming on from all the various platforms. So if it's okay, I'm just going to rat-a-tat-tat them at you. Tim, how do you overcome fear in such an extreme situation? And I am going to try and draw a comparison here. I'm a keyboard warrior, and everyone who's been on a keyboard will have had that email. You would have had a big deal set up, and it's a bit of a life-changing deal. It's going to be the budget for the month, and then you get an email in saying we're not doing it, and you get this sense of fear. Or in your situation of, oh my God, I'm in an earthquake. The fear is washing over you. What's your advice as to how you overcome fear in extreme situations?
So I think the first thing you have to do is accept the fact that fear is a completely normal reaction, right? You're supposed to be afraid. That's the point. Fear comes because your body's smashed full of adrenaline, cortisol, and all of the other various bits and pieces it's trying to work. So one of the things that I do is I accept the fact that I'm afraid, and I don't beat myself up for that. So you go, do you know what? Wow, this has put me on edge, but that's okay. I'm just going to accept that. I'm going to deal with that. I'm going to accept that. And then you come back into this thing of the intelligence, not the information, as you mentioned earlier, Max. What you've got to do is then work out what is actually absolutely real, and then start ticking things off the list. So what can I do? Yep. Sometimes, there's a reason when you're on an aeroplane, they tell you to put your own oxygen mask on first. So actually, if you're feeling afraid and you're in a leadership position, sometimes take a minute, take a deep breath, glass of water, walk around the block, whatever you need to do to kind of let your own system, when that anxiety, that fear kicks, the fight or flight mechanism kicks, your body is actually genuinely full of hormones and chemicals and stuff. And I'm sure you guys know that more than I do. So actually deal with that first, take a tactical pause, and then you'll find that everything comes back into focus a little bit more. And then you go through this process of, right, okay, what's real, what's not real? What right now is a threat to me, or my business? And what do I need to deal with? And then you just literally start to move gently and quietly through that list.
Fantastic. And we've just got Mark and Isaac back in. Guys, inspirational is our Tim, isn't he? If okay, we've got another question in just on WhatsApp. Tim, what happens if you are the leader and you freeze and everyone's looking at you?
Again, I think it's 2 things. It's not unlike public speaking, right? So when you're sort of public speaking, you forget your lines or your words, or you forget to mention something, and suddenly you feel as though the entire world is coming in on you, and you feel like you've stood there for an hour. Whereas the reality is nobody noticed. Everyone was looking at their phones, and the gap was probably 5 seconds. And the reality is, if you're going to freeze because of nervous anxiety, that's okay. Again, it means you're completely normal. Go back to that first aid issue, put your own oxygen mask on, take a minute, take a deep breath, take some water, and never be afraid. I have certainly done it with Paul Horde. Some of you will know, some of the situations Paul and I have been in. Don't be afraid to turn around. I've turned around to Paul before now and gone, mate, I haven't got this. This is trick my switch. Can you sort it out for a second while I sort myself out? Yeah, no bother, mate. And that's a good team. That's how that works.
Yep.
I just noticed on Avril there, Max, on the thing. I don't want Avril. I didn't need to think that I was evading you on the chat box there. That example will work anywhere in agri-tech, Avril, if that makes sense, because what you're actually trying to deal with is what I call the biology of leadership. So any situation that tricks you, whether that's a lost order, whether that's Tesco's halving the price of your milk, or it doesn't matter, anything that suddenly creates a high pressure situation will trigger a fear and a fight or flight mechanism in you. So the techniques that we're dealing with are designed to bring that back. So it doesn't actually matter, if that makes sense, whether that's a business decision, a farming decision, it could be a livestock issue, it could be kit malfunction, if that makes sense. All of that kind of, this is a system, is a toolkit designed you to get back thinking so that you can be operating again. I hope that answers your question, Neville.
There's a nice segue to this golf. I think it was Jack Nicholas who was once commented at the Spectator, said to him, "Oh, that was a lucky shot," and he said something along the lines of, "Yeah, that was thousands of hours of practice that made that lucky shot."
Yeah.
In everything that we're talking about, how can we learn, Tim, to handle situations in a positive manner? Because a lot of people say, it's a bad example, but it's probably also a good one, like a car crash. A lot of people freeze in a car crash and can't work out what to do. Whilst if they can part the emotion and the distress of it, they can break it down, they can accept the situation, and they can do the direction of reassurance. Is there a method where we can learn ready for these events when these events happen? Because we're not sure when they're going to happen.
Yeah, you have to practice, Max. You just have to deal with it as much as you possibly can. I wish I could tell you there was a silver bullet, But what you do is you create kind of mechanisms. So if you play sports, whatever it is you do, just get in the habit of working out what's real. So you can teach your brain. I always laugh. It's a bit like driving a car, and I'm showing old now. I don't even buy a manual car anymore. But I'm sure when we all learned to drive manual cars initially, it was not Sebastian Vettel like, was it? It was kind of like clutch, gear, clutch. And actually, within a week or two, what happens is that all kind of smooths itself out. There was an interesting survey done with Colin McRae, the late rally driver, and he was deemed to have the best reflexes in the world. And there's all sorts of clever stuff on. They were watching his eyes and where he looked and all sorts of clever stuff. But actually, the reality was that it wasn't about his reflexes, because fundamentally our reflexes are sort of fairly similar. It was actually about his ability to prepare and deal with particular situations.
Wow.
So the point I'm trying to make is, if you get yourself in the habit of taking a tactical pause, working out what's real, deal with the intelligence, and then looking for the solutions. So as a habit, so do it when you're not under pressure. Just do it normally. Yeah. Then what happens is, much like you driving that manual car, that then becomes a natural instinct. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think this type of conversation is also really healthy, because it's stimulating people to think about it internally, and hopefully also to talk about it within their peers, colleagues, and family, so that when they do get into an extreme situation, whether it be in business or, God forbid, something like the RTA I've just mentioned, they'll be able to remember this type of conversation, to accept the situation, and to kick on with that direction and reassurance.
Shall we actually just talk about the prickly subject of managing up for a moment? I've just seen Duncan's question. I think Mark's liked it as well. So I would think probably this is where influence comes in. But two or three things. That's probably the second question I get asked the most is, how do I sidestep my boss who's terrible? And it's always really funny, by the way. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed, but your boss is always terrible and you're always brilliant. But that's just a touch of humour. But the point I'm trying to make is this: what you have to do is influence, and you have to put yourself in other people's shoes. So actually, as a team player, you have a responsibility. Max asked me a minute or two ago, what do you do if you freeze? Well, of course, I answered that from the point of view of being the leader. If you're the team player, the same still applies. And by that, what I mean is, ask yourself why that boss is being a problem. Is it because that boss is under pressure? Is it because that person above you is out of their comfort zone? Are they sensing anxiety? Because actually, if your outcome is to make them easier on you, if you can relieve the pressure on them, you'll get what you want. Now, Sandstone rule 1 is don't be weird, but you also have to remember the fact that 20% of the people are actually weird. Hey, Isaac. But that aside, so you can apply that as much as you possibly can. But the point I'm trying to make is this: ask yourself, why is that leader, boss, behaving like that? What is it their outcome? Where is their pressure coming from? And I know Paul has spoken about this at length around private equity and buying businesses. Suddenly you've got somebody that was the boss, that's now not the boss, that's got external pressures in. And what you might well find is that you can influence the behaviours of that person above you by understanding the pressures, external or internal, that are on them and helping them deal with it. Wow. Not always, right? Okay. You will always come across the 1%ers, I am afraid.
Okay. So just to extrapolate that in some of the experiences I've seen. So if you've got a leader, and if one of the managers has got a problem and he needs to discuss it with the leader, if that manager can go to the leader, explain what the problem is, and have 3 solutions, and state, out of these 3 solutions, I think number 2 is going to be the best one. What's your thoughts? Because we've all been in that situation where an individual's gone to a leader and said, I've got a problem, and just expect the leader to sort it. But then that leader's got an inbox full of issues and people banging on the door. And I suppose, and I find that works so well when I've advised, counsel people on that basis. But to go to that next level, as you're sort of intimating, Tim, that if that leader, they can see that, so they're having an issue, and they can pick up what the problem is, so actually go to that leader and say, we think there's a problem here, and we think these are the solutions, and so the leader would then feel. Yeah,
Max, you're absolutely right. But the other bit you've got to bolt to that as well is, probably the most misquote of all time is when your mum said to you, obviously not your mum personally, when your mum said, treat people the way you want to be treated. Well, that's not true, is it? Treat people the way they want to be treated. So the other thing you can absolutely do as well is identify the communication style that your boss, or the person that you're talking about, it was Duncan, I was there, is using, right? So if that boss is a bang, 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 answer solution, and doesn't care about the working out, don't sit there and deliver some fluffy, long-winded, fine, because they're not going to warm to you. If the complete opposite is true, and the boss that you're talking to is, a small animal vet, and it's all about the people and the relationships and how, I'm being cheeky, obviously, how people feel and what that's all about, then that's what you've got to deliver. So when you talk to that boss, the outcome is the same, the message is the same, but the delivery style is different. And that's what I talk about influence, because then I'm going to talk about, hey, Isaac, look, the team are feeling this. And if we could just do that for the team, then they'll feel much better. And this is what we're going to do. I'm going to give the same message, the same outcome. I've just delivered it in a way that, in this case, I'm taking the mick of Isaac, but obviously in the way that Isaac wants to hear it. And that's super powerful as well. It's not rocket science to listen a little bit to the way that person likes to communicate with you. And I always laugh, right? You can always spot people that have been on wacky courses because they talk about mirroring. So when I talk about mirroring, I don't mean do not sit opposite the person copying everything they do, okay? Rule 1, do not be weird. Yeah. But actually what you can do is communicate to them in a way that they're going to respond to. And that's what I talk about mirroring.
Well done. A question from WhatsApp. Tim's obviously been involved in some amazing businesses. What are some of the best business practices that he's seen and some of the worst business practices he's seen on a management perspective?
Don't lead with the numbers. Never, ever lead with the numbers. You can't motivate people with numbers. You can't inspire people with numbers. Numbers will never recruit a good team, and they don't fix people. For me, the KPI, whatever KPI you might use, key performance indicator that you might use, all of that does is tell you whether the leadership is working or not. So, and I often, if I don't know if anyone watches Formula One or whatever, but if the racing team goes to the track, all the stopwatch does is tell them whether or not what they've just done to the car has worked or not. So never, ever, ever lead with the numbers or the spreadsheets. All the KPIs do is tell you whether you're on the right track or not. Always lead the people first, particularly over the last year or so, because the people are capable of fixing the numbers. The numbers are not capable of fixing the people. Fact.
Well, there's a program that's just started out of Channel 5 about how Tesco was formed. And the one thing that's coming from that was take a risk. Take a risk. And Tim, can you imagine saying that to your accountant? Take a risk. There would just be totally get that. And what about best business examples that you've seen?
In terms of what? In terms of leadership behaviours, Max?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I really like it when you watch people that actually genuinely care about their people. It's really, really interesting when you talk about leadership in general. There's only really 2 or 3 KPIs that you can use to talk about leadership, and retention in 6 days, is one of them. Okay. And there's a fine line to tread along, if you see what I mean, between being obviously too tolerant and too soft, especially in an industry that requires you to be physically robust, but also in terms of kind of looking after the people. And there's a couple of big law firms, which are obviously professional services firms that we deal with, that have very much taken a step off the way they used to do things. And they're absolutely now looking to kind of look after, inspire, and deliver more soft skills rather than necessarily delivering kind of legal services training. And the results are speaking for themselves.
Fantastic. And coming back to this conundrum that we've got about farms. Farms are relatively isolated individuals. We don't tend to have that water cooler moment, perhaps like some officers have. What would your advice be to farms, to those leaders within the farms, as to how they could deploy the soft skills for their team to get the team through to the next level, to encourage them, to retain them? If you could be dropped into a farm we're doing it now. If with the number of farmers that are listening in, what would be your direct advice as to the magic dust that we could give to them so that they could, in some respects, then revolutionise their business through your learnings, through your skill set?
Never be afraid to reach out. Never be afraid to ask for help. It's a sign of strength. Asking for help, even if those people are junior to you, provided they've obviously got some experience, but never be afraid to ask for help. Never be afraid to reach out. And the more isolated you are, the more important it is to reach out. Remember 2 things, right? That there's a difference between setting a rhythm and a check-in. Setting a rhythm is a Monday morning 9 o'clock meeting, is a Wednesday 9 o'clock meeting, and a Friday 9 o'clock meeting. It actually achieves nothing other than to set a rhythm. Checking in is when I pick up the phone and I say to Isaac, it's Tim, you're all right. Yes, mate, I'm all right. What did you want? Nothing. Just checking, all right. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Resist the urge to then start talking about, productivity or soil yield or whatever else you want to talk about, right? If you're going to look after people, you lot need to get out more, by the way. But if you're going to look after people, do that. And the more isolated you are, the more, in my view, the more important that is. And I've worked pretty isolated in places like Afghanistan. So the more isolated you are, the more reach out. And also remember that when you're in a bubble, I don't mean a corona bubble, I mean a kind of world bubble in general. By definition, you're blinkered. So you're utterly focused on that job in hand and what you're doing. And just occasionally, the answer might be here or over here. And sometimes making that phone call, reaching out, asking somebody. And the other thing that's really interesting is that actually empowers people. There's nothing better than when somebody phones you up and says, "Hey, Tim, I just really like your advice on this. Or what's your thoughts on that?" And actually you sort of go, "Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah, blimey, things I know what I'm talking about." So it works both ways. You get an answer, but also it's quite empowering for the person you've actually hit the phone up to as well.
Yeah, well, fantastic. Just on that side, Mark, Isaac, if there's a farmer or someone from the ag trade who's wants to communicate, wants to share a problem, wants to have a discussion, can the AHDB assist them on that basis? Isaac?
Yeah, definitely. So, through AgriLeader and now our people offering, we do all sorts of courses and got all sorts of resources to help people with communication and how to some of the softer skills. So yeah, get in contact and we can definitely help with that.
Fantastic. Mark, thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, no, definitely. Just pick the phone up, and if we can't help, or we can steer you in the direction that we'll be able to get some help. Because
and guys, on that note, Mark, as well, Paul and I know we have an open book policy, guys. So if you're listening today and you're part today and you just want to talk to somebody that's outside of the industry, I'm not a counselor or anything, but you just want to bounce some stuff around, then find me on LinkedIn. It's super easy. It's probably the easiest way to get hold of me, actually, to be honest. Particularly as I might actually be travelling again soon. Something weird happened. I got a plane yesterday, which is pretty weird. But wow. Please be comfortable reaching out. Find me on LinkedIn, and I'm super happy. And I'm going to send Mark the invoice anyway. So, but please feel free to reach out and get in touch. And if nothing else, we might be able to point you in the right direction. And that is a very sincere offer, guys. And I know Paul Hoard would be in the same way.
And Tim, you mentioned about Jeremy Clarkson with his Lamborghini tractors, but one thing that you all have already ascertained, I'm sure, about the ag sector is how welcoming, how charitable everyone is, and that element that you said, Tim, about soldiers being big and tough. I'm just going to say again, it does resonate within the farming community that farmers are big and tough, and sometimes they don't want to talk, and sometimes they don't want to share. When the best thing that they could do is to do that. So to reach out to the likes of Tim or the chaps at the AHDB, or your neighbour, or anyone, just to have that conversation. And I'm sure all three of you also find the same, that sometimes you just need to break out of your own world, your own bubble. And if you do have a problem, again, what Tim was saying, if you've got a problem, just step out of it. Just park it for the night. Go to the pub, whether it be virtual or not, or just engage with something else. You'll then have a clearer mind. Tim, your endorphins won't be flowing at that point, will they? And you'll be able to have a more sensible thought discussion, and perhaps engage with the likes of the AHDB to get help to take yourself to the next level. Tim, just on that side, I had another question in. Have you seen anyone who's been a complete train wreck, and either you or your contacts have been able to assist them to make a success within business and make a success of their life personally?
Yeah, I mean, it would be inappropriate of me to give you details, if that makes sense. But certainly, one of the things that is a misnomer is that let's not beat around the bush anymore. Let's talk about mental health, and that's what we're talking about fundamentally, because it all stems from anxiety, which stems from pressure. And what a lot of people don't realise is that things such as anxiety and depression, which I suffer with both, by the way, and that's got nothing to do with having been to war, but one of the common misnomers is it's a sign of weakness, because the reality is that it tends to be high functioning people that actually struggle. And the reason for that is because they have incredibly high expectations of their own performances and where they should be, and they tend to take on loads of stuff, and they tend to have 5 or 6 plates spinning at any one time. So they then impose an enormous amount of self-pressure. It's not criticism, it's an observation. So actually it tends to be the super high functioning people. And I've certainly worked a number of occasions in various professional services sectors where you've just almost pointed that back out to somebody and almost given them permission to have a minute, because we carry this expectation, I've got to perform, I've got to perform, I've got to perform. And I'll never ever forget being in Afghanistan one day and wanting to be up and wanting to help the troops do what they're going to do and help my guys out. And one of the guys turned around to me and said, "Boss, go to bed." I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, we've got, guns to clean and vehicles to prep and plans to write, etc." Like, no, boss, we can do all of that. Tomorrow, when it goes wrong, we need you thinking. That's your job, is to operate. So we can clean the guns and we can clean the cars. That's no bother. You go and sleep, because we can't do the bit that we need you to do tomorrow. So the answer I'm trying to give you, Max, is on a number of occasions I've given people, if you like, permission to have a minute. And okay, that might mean you miss a deadline and that might have financial connotations. But the deadline, the risk, if you like, of not doing that, or the consequences of not doing that, can be even more severe. So don't be afraid to give yourself a minute, whatever that minute looks like. If that means you go and watch 10 back-to-back episodes on Netflix, or whatever that means, you take the dogs out for a walk, it literally doesn't matter. Find yourself that minute, and that's what you've got to do. That's where the rehab, if you like, the reset, I suppose, probably comes from. And I've seen that work with a number of senior people.
It's a fascinating area. I'm just halfway through an audio book, a political audio book, and they mentioned about Lord Heseltine. Lord Heseltine, for those younger viewers, listeners, was a key Conservative politician, cabinet minister, deputy prime minister in the 80s, early 90s. He has said behind closed doors that he feels he's failed in some respects because he never made prime minister. He set up a multi-million-pound turnover publishing company as well as being a politician, and he feels that he's failed because he never made it to that top echelon, because that's where he was striving to get. Tim, just coming back to what you were saying, so what are we saying? That we should let go to grow in some respects, as a leader, let go to grow.
There's a good friend of mine, she's a lady called Kath Bishop, and she's written an amazing book called The Long Win, which is if you're into that, it's worth a read. And frankly, she's spectacularly annoying, if I'm really honest, right? Because she's like a diplomat. She's a Oxbridge graduate, and she rowed at the Olympics, so she's one of life's spectacular overachievers. But again, I remember, she sort of got a silver medal at the Olympics and saw it as a failure. Crazy, right? But one of the things she says is, what you've got to do is focus on your own performance. So in other words, and by what I mean by that is, let's just take that Olympic rowing race for a minute. Let's use Kath's example. Can she control whether she wins or loses that race? No. Can she control whether the other countries race effectively or faster than her? No. The only thing she can control is her own performance. And if you're going to control your own performance, you've got to do that for the long term. Now, I did some work with security services, which we won't talk about here. But one of the things we like to do in the army is turn ourselves inside out. We'll go on exercise for 2 weeks. And if we can not sleep for 2 weeks, then that's brilliant. We'll go to Afghanistan for 7 months. And if we can not sleep for 7 months, that's even better. Must be big and tough, right? And then suddenly you start to work with people that are a bit brighter than that. And what happens is they go, what are you doing? Like you can't keep that up. It's not sustainable. So if you haven't slept for a couple of days, you're now rubbish. Not only that, but actually we need you to look after those relationships for the next 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years, not 6 months. So you've got to find a rhythm and a tempo that you can sustain, even if that means short term, you have to bring your kind of out and out pace back a little bit. And I know it's very easy for me to say that sitting here when it's not me under the pressure that you guys are under. But if you take the theory and have a look at it, sometimes you've got to set a rhythm that you can continue to operate at. Sometimes 80%, 90% for a year is better than 98% in 5 minutes. It's just a slightly different way of looking at it.
You've just taken me back. You just taken me back in time. I remember being on a harvest and being told off by the farmer for being too busy, and he said, "Max, you got to be in it to win it. Slow down. Got to be in it for the long term." Gentlemen, we're slightly running out of time. We could talk to Tim all day, Mark.
I just answer Abby, because I think that's a really important point that Abby came up with on the chat box there. Abby, you raised a really, really good point, okay? And what I do want to do is differentiate just two different factors here. So the one is, when you're a leader, all of those same emotions that we're talking about with your team happen to you, right? So the fight or flight mechanism kicks in, you become potentially kind of aggressive. I don't mean that you're going to start beating your team up sort of a way. It's a natural reaction designed to help you, fight or run away or whatever. So the two things you've got to do. The first thing, you've got to take away your own personal anxiety, if that makes sense. So in other words, if I'm about to snap at Max, because I'm under pressure, I can't allow that emotion to show through. Does that make sense? So in other words, if Max has done nothing that I shouldn't snap at him for, then I need to take a deep breath and not snap at him because of something I've done wrong or a pressure that I'm under. That is different. But what I think you're talking about, if you are frustrated, if you are finding it hard, tears of frustration, etc., I don't think personally that's a bad thing. As long as you're still working a problem and still doing what we talked about, for the last hour or so, I don't think that's a bad thing personally, because people see you as human and people are more obliged to feel closer to you and to help you become part of the solution. But hopefully you can see the difference between those two things. Abby, did that make sense?
It did to us, Tim. Mark, Isaac, I think that this last hour has been what we were hoping to get from this Talking Leaders broadcast. It's been inspirational. I know I for one are going to listen back to the broadcast and pick up the key elements that I want to revisit for myself and what I do. The three takeaways from me that Tim said in his presentation about accept the situation that you're in, direct and reassure those around you, and focus on what you can do. If you can focus on that and build on that, it's going to work. It's going to be okay. Mark, Isaac, what's your thoughts as we sum up, please? Mark, you go first.
Wow, we've summited Everest and back. What a great discussion in less than an hour. I think, a couple of points that I picked up on. It's one of your first starting lines, Tim. I'm not very academic, but I can read, but it just proves that leadership and management and development of that isn't just for that iconic leader. It's for everybody, and everyone can build and do on that. Then to build on your point, Max, about it's normal, it's human to cock up, to feel fear, to show emotion. So don't use that as a negative. It can actually be a positive. But if you're in those situations, it's take a minute. And I like that term, take a minute, whatever that may be to you, to actually regroup and then create that habit of being able to control the controllable. And then I suppose the final bit, it goes back to the toolbox element. And I think that's an important factor as well, because farmers, growers from all different sectors are all very different. But that toolbox has a range of tools in it that isn't directed at a certain challenge. You can assort the tools to do the job and solve the problem. And my last final point, always lead people first. I think that's a really good point.
I've never seen a motivational spreadsheet. Sorry, any accountants.
Well said.
Very good. Now, excellent, and an excellent summary there from Mark and yourself, Max. Has made me reflect on some of the things that I maybe used to do, and all of a sudden you think, where did I lose that? So brilliant. And my one key take-home message is all about the people. It is all about the people. You can't achieve anything without the people. So. Thank you very much, Tim, Max, Mark, and get in touch and engage with the AgriLeader program. Get in touch with Mark and myself if you want to engage with that, please. So brilliant, thank you, brilliant hour.
Isaac, thank you, Tim. Just give us a takeaway. You'll be used to this. What's your takeaway for all of the farming community on this AHDB Talking Leaders broadcast? What's the takeaway that you can give us that we're just going to remember for now on?
Understand what success looks like for you personally. Always step towards it. Doesn't matter how small the step is, keep moving towards it and always be part of the solution.
Boom. And I just have to wrap up and say my 13-year-old son, he wants to see this recording. We're so excited to hear from you. He wanted to know what's your favourite tractor. And I think we know. So Tim, what's your favourite tractor, please?
It's got to be a Lamborghini, isn't it?
It has, hasn't it? I guess for that. So, gentlemen, thank you very much thank you very much for this, for all participating in this Talking Leaders broadcast with the fantastic team of Isaac and Mark and all of their colleagues at the AHDB. I think you've all knocked it out of the park today. Everyone, be well, and we'll see you hopefully at the next Talking Leaders broadcast very shortly.
Thanks, Max. Thanks, guys.
Brilliant. Thank you. Have a good day.